our very first interview with Councilmember Natasha Harper-Madison. She was elected in December 2018 and took office on January 6, 2019 to represent District 1, which is located in Northeast Austin. She previously served as president of the East 12th Street Merchants Association and personally founded East Austin Advocates, a local nonprofit aimed towards connecting underrepresented people in the community to various resources. Most recently, she has provided vital leadership in Austin City Council discussions and public outreach surrounding the reality of systemic racism, both in our city and the country as a whole. Councilmember, welcome to the first interview of our series, Policy Drivers. I would now like to hand it over to you to personally introduce yourself.
Thank you. So, hi everybody, I'm Natasha Harper-Madison, born and raised East Austinite, and that makes it all the more a great source of pride for me to serve on the Austin City Council for District 1. And for those who don't know, that's the east side of town, the east side of the highway, the traditionally disinvested, overlooked part of town. And I'm personally hoping that we can put a massive dent in that. Thank you for having me today.
Yes, we're so excited to have you. So we have all been following the past couple weeks, all the council meetings that have been happening and listening in here and there, trying to just keep up with what's happening in our local government, which is very important, especially as quite a few of the interns are working on policy work over at LBJ. And so we, as Jay said at the beginning, there has been a very long couple of weeks, but a lot of things got passed this week on the agenda. We just want to ask you how you are feeling. How are you feeling after these past couple of weeks?
Yeah, just sort of kind of like we were discussing, prior to the official kickoff. I'm tired, but I'm invigorated too, right? So that recognizing the duality, you get to be both. I feel fantastic. This is one of those things where I feel like history will be kind to me. When we look back on what it is that we did this week, my colleagues and I, and the bold steps that we took, I'm really proud of the work we did. I'm really proud that we were able to get, unanimous is hard to pull off. And we got unanimous and, just really recognizing, we heard from over 300 people yesterday, and most of them were fully supportive of the actions we were taking and look forward to us going even further, in which case that really is like how you, I think in this role, really get fortified by having people support you and show their support for the work you're doing. So I feel tired, but I feel fantastic. Thank you.
I think it really speaks volumes, how much support you all have from the community, and not only this unanimous vote was just amazing. So congratulations to you specifically as well.
Thank you.
So I think one of the things that we're all wondering is, what do you personally wish that someone would have told you when you first started getting into public policy in this sphere?
Oh boy. Okay, well, where to start there? I will say that I was fortunate in that, so one of my colleagues has been a friend of mine for a really long time. So Delia Garza and my husband went through a cadet class together. And so I've known them, they worked at their first fire station together. So I've known her for a very long time. And so I think she felt comfortable offering me some friendly advice in addition to a new colleague advice. And it was, you get into this work because you want to be a voice. You want to be a voice for people who you feel like aren't being represented. And pretty quickly though, once you get here and you realize the policy element of it, outside of the person who's interested in the advocacy component, the policy element is chocked full of compromise, and it's nuanced in a way that, her advice to me was, don't back off when your voice doesn't sound like yours anymore. You're still representing for people and you're still showing up as a voice, but you're also recognizing the complexity of the constant compromises. And in order to get things done, that's what it looks like. And I think she warned me, but you just sometimes you don't know the gravity until you're there, and then you really see it, I wish somebody had told me. My mom used to say, baby girl, you're about as soft as white bread, and what she was trying to say was I'm sensitive. And my general demeanor is gentle and sensitive. And you don't get to bring that to this job. Not all the time, because People are mean. That's something that I wish I really had a better understanding of coming in, that the attacks will come, but being able to remind yourself that if they're mad at you, you're doing something really right. So keep pushing. And then lastly, I think the other thing that I really wish I had known prior to was how to truly prepare my family for the fact that this was all of our job now. You know, it's not like mom got a new job and she goes to work from 8 to 5. No, this is all of ours now, both from the perspective of public perception and people just not respecting privacy. You know, once you get in, you're everybody's, and, you know, trying to figure out that balance of what you give, how much you keep to yourself. And definitely I would have prepared my family better had I known.
Thank you so much. That's great advice, especially for me personally. I think it's just wonderful. And even to your point about being sensitive, I feel like as a woman, it's so hard, especially in politics, to bring out that sensitive side and just be really yourself in politics. And I feel like listening to you over the past couple weeks in your council meetings has really just inspired me. And I just wanted to let you know you're a huge inspiration, not only to me, but to so many people at LBJ. It's just been really, try not to get choked up right now. Wow. It's just been really wonderful seeing you in a place of leadership in Austin. So I just wanted to express that. And I'm sure I speak for the rest of the interns here as well.
I appreciate that very much. I think sometimes people forget to say nice things, you know?
Yes.
So thank you. I appreciate the nice things.
You're very welcome. So kind of piggybacking off of that, not only just starting, but we have a lot of friends and colleagues that are starting out into policy right now, or even in the next couple months or in the next couple of years. And it's a very interesting climate to enter into right now, not only just in the world in general, but in policy, in the policy space. There's so much changing. So what would be kind of advice for entering policy now? You've kind of given this like the past, what you would have liked, but entering into this sphere now, what kind of advice would you give people?
Well, so if I can preface the answer to that with recognizing that I had never been to City Hall until 2017. I was not involved in municipal politics or policy, because there's a difference, prior to. And I think the first thing is, in terms of advice, you don't have to know where we came from, just jump in where we are. So oftentimes, you know, people will make reference to, you know, resolutions and addendums that happened 5 years ago, and half the time without doing some research, I don't know what they're talking about. And so I say, jump in where you start. Don't necessarily, you know, try to go back and then evolve beyond where we were. I think right now is a super exciting time to be talking policy. It's you know, it's transformational. We really, as a society, as a municipality, as a country, everything's changing, and that's a good thing. So I think people should be excited about jumping into something that's refreshed and renewed and evolved. I think it's a good time. So yay you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is just such an amazing experience for all of us getting to talk to you. And all four of us are students right now. And I feel like as students, especially at a school and within like a smaller school, UT, wanting to, in both schools, we represent LBJ and community and regional planning. So what would be kind of more specific skills and knowledge that you think students would need trying to seek out and prepare for this? I know you've built on a lot of this already, so a lot of it might be the same, but kind of more like specific skills and knowledge that might prepare us for the preparation coming into this field.
The preparation, I'd say having some general idea about what it is that you want to get good at. I know oftentimes we try to do this thing where our interests are so broad, and I'm guilty of it all the time, because the way my brain works is I connect the dots and I'm like, well, it's all connected, so I have to do it all. You can't. You can't. And so just really owning that piece, like you can't do it all. So figure out what drives you, what will make it so that even when you're absolutely exhausted, you know that you can get some work done. And, that recognition of the fact that a lot of what we do from the policy perspective will come to fruition in my tenure. I won't see it happen. It'll happen to council members from me. And, really offering yourself some grace there, and not receiving the immediate gratification, you mostly won't get it. And so really going into that with appropriate expectations, I think is good. And then just figure out what your thing is, what's your primary focus. And if that has, a couple of sub bullets, so be it, but don't try to do it all.
I think that's very valid advice, especially coming from someone who does. I feel like I try and connect the dots a little bit too much sometimes with policy work. So that's definitely a very, very insightful advice to have. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So kind of as a native Austinite and a constant advocate, as we've seen, not only for yourself, but for others, what are some victories that you are most proud of, not only during your time, but kind of just in general in Austin?
Oh, I'm really proud of the work that we were able to do to get folks, existing in the margins connected with resources by way of East Austin Advocates. And I know people often say it was a nonprofit, but it never was a nonprofit. East Austin Advocates was born of me recognizing that there was just some shortages in, getting people, the resources existed and the people existed and the need existed, but there was no bridge to connect it. So I think I really made some strides there, and now folks know who to call. I get calls from people who exist, in places where they never get visited by council people or never watch council meetings. I know some of the policy wonks on the line, y'all can sit there and watch a 10-hour council meeting, and that's just not something some of these folks do or would even be inclined to do. So when I get calls from them at my office, because I said, I want to represent everybody, knowing that I did the work in the beginning to really build that trust in the community because I was able to help. I think that feels like momentous as a win. I definitely feel like some of the work that we were able to accomplish in, introducing these conversations around something that's really important to me is mobility justice. Getting folks who are outside of that arena, who are not, avid bike advocates, to really start talking about multimodal transportation in a way that doesn't feel foreign in their mouth. That feels great. I really love that, our conversations around civic engagement have evolved beyond, asking people to show up at City Hall and moved into people showing up at City Hall with some specific ask. They know what they're asking for. That definitely feels wonderful. Some of the work that we've been able to get done in District 1 with, making certain that as the conversations around Project Connect and some of the other mobility dialogue is happening, making certain that folks know there's a voice that's going to be a strong and persistent advocate for not excluding this part of the community feels fantastic. Some of the work that we've been able to get done, some of the work we got done this week started with item number 66 from December, which was, at the time, that was the monumentous thing that we did. And, the results of that resolution, which included, doing an independent investigation into the police department and discovering what some of the deeply embedded flaws were, recognizing that we weren't surprised by the results. Nobody was surprised by the results, but now it's tangible. And now we have some action that we can take. So those kinds of resolutions where even if there's not complete resolution of the issue or reconciliation of the issue, recognizing that now we're moving into the next phase of getting the actual work done. All of that just, it gets me up every morning whistling Dixie. I love my job.
That's wonderful. That must feel really good to have some just really concrete examples for you to just feel like I have really helped instigate this kind of change. And I think that's really amazing.
Absolutely.
So kind of to like a community and residents question, piggybacking off of really just community involvement and people really showing up and being there and advocating for change and coming up with those asks. What do you specifically kind of wish that residents in the Austin community would either get more involved in or be more in tune with what's happening here in Austin?
that's where I go back to connecting the dots, where we're thinking about addressing cyclical poverty for people existing in it. You know, it's food access, it's health access, it's transit and mobility justice, it's education, it's financial literacy, it's, you know, sort of combating some of these manifestations of the criminal justice system that is deeply flawed. But the folks over here who don't exist in that space, this is their problem because they don't have to deal with it. So really just getting folks to marry the two is something I'm always trying to figure out how to do. So I wish people would be better about, when we're talking about the community. So, you know, I like to think that I'm an advocate for all of the community, both people existing in the margins and out. I'd like to advocate for those people to make issues that aren't theirs by way of lived experience, theirs because their neighbors are experiencing it. And those that are experiencing those things, to be able to say, have a concrete, tangible ask. I have this issue, and this is an idea I have to get that done. Some of the things that I'd like to encourage people to do more of is get involved in boards and commissions. I really don't think a lot of folks put as much stock as they should in that boards and commissions involvement. We have 62 boards and commissions, and they range from, you know, African-American quality of life to art to, you know, music. I mean, there's a commission or board for everything that we at the policy level have to take into consideration. And oftentimes what it is that we're considering are direct recommendations from those bodies. And so I want to encourage everybody to do way more of that.
Absolutely. We have to start somewhere. Just get the ball rolling, as they say.
Absolutely. And even if, you know, if I may just real quick, even if it's not taking on the volunteer responsibility of being a commissioner, because that's the trick. It's a volunteer gig, you know, and so a lot of folks just can't do it. Being able to go and testify before the boards and commissions about your specific issue can also move the needle.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's very
Sure.
helpful. So kind of moving to a more like specific question. Earlier this year, there were plans for the I-35 Capital Express project that were approved to kind of make changes to the interstate corridor through Austin. And given the history that we're all aware of I-35 being used to reinforce redlining and really separate these two parts of Austin and various other segregation policies, what changes to the I-35 corridor would be the most beneficial to these communities closest to the highway, and how closely do you think these plans for the Capital Express project really align with that?
That's tricky. So a part of the trick there has to do with, you guys will have to forgive me. I have a kid emergency. I'll be right back. I think your question was about 35. And I said that's tricky because it sounds radical when I say it, but the truth is, I think it'd be great to just rip out the highway entirely. But since we can't do that, I think mitigating it as a physical barrier really should be a priority. I think we have to be super intentional just so we don't take down the wall, but then further displacement by increasing property values. So it's unfortunately not an easy fix, no matter how you swing it. And honestly, I don't think there are enough people, enough voices involved in the conversation. That's one of those things about policy, right? So much of it is so technically complex that nobody's going to become a subject matter expert on transit overnight. It has to be your thing. Nobody's going to become a subject matter expert on land use overnight. It has to be your thing. And that's one of the tricky things about, you know, community involvement. You know, I just think as a policymaker, in large part, that's my role. So I'll stay up all night and I'll read about this thing and I'll do my best to advocate for you, because not everybody's going to be able to do that.
That is great and wonderful, wonderful points as well. I think most of us who understand what I-35 was created for can really recognize that there needs to be some real change there, and hopefully we can start getting more conversations going about that and making some real change there. So I've been able to ask you lots of questions, but I kind of want to move over to Tynan too, so maybe she and some of my other colleagues have a chance to ask you some questions as well.
Right.
Yeah, I'm completely with you about learning this as a subject matter thing. I haven't been really steeped in transportation policy until starting this internship a few weeks ago, and there is just so much ground to cover. In like you were saying, everything is connected. Like all the different transit systems are connected. The way that we've planned the city, the way that we specifically plan roadways, and whether they're one way or two way, medians, roundabouts, all of that is are contributing factors, and it's such minutia that it's really hard to grasp unless you spend a lot of time moving through that and learning a lot of things about that. So we definitely appreciate your efforts as a council member to inject that into the community for those who don't have time to do that. In terms of initiatives that we advocate for and that Austin has adopted for Vision Zero, the goal bringing number of traffic fatalities to zero, what do you consider to be some of the most pressing traffic safety concerns in the district?
I keep trying to mute you. I for the life of me can't figure out how to turn off my email notifications, so it's gonna ding 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 at you. Sidewalks, can we start there? I mean, safe crossings, pedestrian crossings, an urban environment that's built to accommodate high-speed cars instead of walkable communities is a part of the problem. Right. And I think it's that culture shift, right? When I offended somebody because I said something about how we're so attached to if I see one more giant dually with no mud on it, if you don't have a ranch job that you need that for, come on. I mean, I just think generally, culturally, we really have to rethink transit and transportation and how you move people around. And I think that being able to have a more, we certainly won't have the same influence as the car lobby, but I think folks who are recognizing and understanding the need to have communities that are built around people and not around cars, we have to do as much lobbying and as much talking to folks as they do.
Yeah, I agree. The kind of individualistic culture of the United States plays into our feeling of like a need for a car. Like where's my individuality lie if I don't have access to a car where I can go wherever I want, whenever I want.
Right.
And sort of changing the public idea about that to, you can still have freedom to go the places that you want and be an individual if we have better transit systems that can get you there without it taking you 45 minutes versus 12 in your car, right? So I'm totally with you on that, and changing the public consciousness to be more embracing of walkable areas and sharing, multi-use paths and stuff like that. Great point.
If I could build on that a little bit, I'd say, so when I'm talking to the elders in the community, recognizing that historically there's some implications about when, you made it when you could get a car, and so there's that part. So I really try to be sensitive and not minimize people's attachment, because for some folks it means something other than that ability to get to the place faster. For some folks it's it's status in a way that when you don't have a whole lot of other status symbols, people are deeply attached to that. Then the other thing I would say about that is it's regional. And so we wouldn't be having this conversation in places that have comprehensive transit systems and have really attacked the concept of, building for people and not for cars. And so we all have to recognize that ours is going to be trickier than some other places.
Yeah, just the nature of Texas as a state where everything is so spread out and everything is really like low and wide instead of being really concentrated and tall. What do you think that the biggest challenge will be to get every city or county or MPO to make commitments to improve traffic safety and reduce these fatalities and injuries? Like, what do you think is going to be the biggest barrier to get everybody on board with this goal?
Well, I mean, I think I spoke to this briefly earlier, but just Campo's disproportionate representation gives suburban and rural communities more leverage over Austin. And frankly, their priorities are different than ours. I think we're really going to have to convince folks that climate change is going to hurt everybody. It will not be selective, and that we all have to plan for walkable, transit-friendly communities. It's everybody's best interest. You know, climate reality is again, it will not be selective. And I think that's one of the things to really drive home, because then we don't have to differentiate based on priorities. That should be everybody's concern and everybody's priority.
Yeah, agreed. And to your earlier point about underserved communities, I mean, it's going to affect everybody, but particularly those communities, because it always hits the underserved communities harder. Any issue that deals with damage is going to have disproportionate effects. So, you know, like you were saying earlier, really convincing people that problems that don't affect them are still important problems, and problems that their neighbors are experiencing are things worth getting into and trying to make a difference in, because we all do, we're all happier when everybody is doing better, and we're a more productive society, we're a happier society. So yeah, I'm totally with you on that. What is your, in terms of engaging with constituents, what is your kind of personal philosophy with that? I mean, I can kind of tell already that you really enjoy going out into your community and connecting with people that way, and you're not like just in your seat at city council and never interacting with people. But what is your kind of formative feelings about that, and why do you believe that that's very important?
It's essential. I'll tell you a funny story about when I got fired by a PR firm. I'm evolving, but I'm not always as refined and sophisticated as I could be as a policymaker. And so I engaged with this PR firm to kind of help walk me through the evolution, you know, of becoming a more polished politician. And the question was, what's your primary goal? And I said, my primary goal was to build capacity. To which the response was, how do you mean? It's like, well, I won't do this forever. Somebody else has got to do it next, and then somebody after them, and then they need allies and supporters and advocates to work alongside them. My primary goal is to build capacity, both by way of people who will fill these roles and by way of the community who will need them to buy in as stakeholders and trust us. That's the most important part. And so it seems patronizing when you tell somebody to just trust the process, when, you know, there's so much historic, rightful mistrust, you know. So you got to get out and tell people about what your intentions are and what you're working on, and, you know, really in a way that's not condescending, kind of walk them through the complexity of some of the stuff, and how, you know, you tell them what they need to know, and then the hope is that you've built enough trust that some of the finer points, the minutiae, as you would, you get to do behind the scenes, and you don't have to drag them through all of that. And then, you know, capacity building in the way that I think it's important to have people see you rather enjoy doing the job. Because if I just told them about all the stuff that happens on the back end, I won't be able to convince any of y'all to do this job. And so I guess my philosophy is just be open and honest, but be mindful about coming across with any air of condescension. It's palpable. People can feel that. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I think edify, build people up, tell them how great they are and how you can't wait to see them take your job, you know, and I do that all the time. And so I guess more or less building people up and bringing people along with you is my philosophy.
Yeah, I think that's a great philosophy to have. And I definitely wish that more elected officials would be like that, because, you know, it shouldn't be about you as an individual. It should be about your community and how you can be a mouthpiece for those people and make space for those people to continue to be engaged when you're no longer in city government or when you move on to a different role. So we thank you for doing that work and for coming out into the community and being an advocate and not being patronizing and really working through it with people. How has your experience working as an elected official been different from working in policy in any other role? What do you think are some advantages and disadvantages of being an elected versus being kind of a behind the scenes policy person?
Well, other than the obvious, you know, everybody sees everything, in which case there's all this, you got to become an illusionist and fancy dance, you know, in a way that I'm not accustomed to. I'd like to be more 100% transparent, but some of it, like I said, some of it is just so technical. Mm-hmm. those parts really aren't critical in terms of what it is that you share with folks. So I'm not accustomed to that, having to do, so much of it behind the scenes, including, a unanimous vote doesn't just happen. You got to knock on doors and make phone calls and get people moving in the direction that you think is appropriate. And the other thing I'd say is I think this might even build off of the last question and answer. A lot of folks were born and bred for this job. Somebody's been grooming them to do this job forever. And so every decision they've made to date led them in this direction. And so they kind of already had it figured out. That also speaks to sort of a general lack of access to this job. If you don't have some degree of independent wealth, if you can't work a 90-hour week for not enough money, if you have kids who are going to come in and fight over a granola bar, if you have things happening in your life that make it so that you can't do this job, because there are challenges, then that means we have less in the way of diversity. In which case, it's as old as history. It's by design. It's supposed to be a certain segment of the population that governs us and makes policy. And so, I guess that would be the other thing I say, just recognizing that and pushing through that, in a way that it's different than any other thing I've ever had to do when it comes to community advocacy. And honestly, nobody's mad at you when you're advocating for them. Nobody's taking issue with how you get it done. But once you get in this role and you're under the microscope, every single thing you do has to either be perfect or, you're going to have to spend some time walking people along and having them understand that even if we don't all the way see eye to eye on this thing, I hear you, I see you, we disagree on this thing. And that's a process. It's a necessary process. You don't want people arbitrarily mad at you, but that part of the process is time consuming in a way that you really got to make time for things that are not policy.
Yeah. Well, it has been amazing to watch you do that in these meetings that we've been tuning into. And I've really appreciated learning from you and how you have lifted people's voices and tried to, make space for parts of the segments of the population that don't get a voice very often. It's been really amazing to watch that. And I'd love to one day emulate that in my own behavior and help some people up once I, climb one more rung. So I just wanted to personally thank you for being such a great example of a community advocate and something that I'd love to do myself one day. In terms of your short-term or long-term goals and your time with City Council, what would you like to get done? What are some things or policies that you're really excited to implement and see changed within the City of Austin?
Well, we did some of it already with the $250 million affordable housing bond. We're moving in the right direction in that way. So my one thing is actually three things because of the connecting of the dots thing. It's affordability in housing, it's access, and that's access to all things and equity in all things. That's healthcare, that's education. But those access points tend to be pretty singular. So it's affordability in housing, it's access, and it's transit and mobility. And so we've been able to get a lot of that done so far, and I really do anticipate that, whether I decide to do this again or not, we've pointed ourselves in the right direction in terms of trajectory. So I think we're getting done a lot of what I wanted to see happen, and I just want to keep pushing on those 3 points.
Well, thank you very much for those are the rest of my questions that I have. I'm going to open it up to the floor, but we just want to thank you for all of the amazing labor that you've been doing recently and before, there was more scrutiny on you, and just how much you've really stuck your neck out and put yourself out there to, stand up for what you believe in, and no matter how personally difficult that has been for you. So we all just wanted to thank you. And I wanted to open up the floor to anybody else who has any questions for the councilwoman or any comments on the answers that she's given.
I have one. My name is Madilyn, and I really appreciate what you said earlier about sort of learning to adjust to the different expectations of this sort of field and role in the community, because I am also a little new to policy. The things that I'm used to are more along the lines of running around outside, like chasing snakes through the bushes, rather than like knowing how to do other things. So I think sort of jumping off of that, what would you say are sort of the most unexpected things that you have had to adjust culture-wise? I know you mentioned some of it earlier, but just the least expected things that you would not have thought that you would have needed to learn to sort of adjust to policy.
I guess let me just make sure to get some clarity. To adjust to policy or the act of being a policymaker?
Either one. So maybe transitioning to an elected official, like what is the most surprising sort of skill that you have needed to learn to adjust to that culture? And I know you've touched on this a little bit several times, but.
Not being accustomed to watching every single solitary thing you say, because sometimes you'll say something and it'll be taken out of context, or you just didn't even think about it. Well, I won't give you any examples. I'll just say not being accustomed to be mindful about every single word you say and how that could be misconstrued at some point it's counterintuitive, you know? And so there's that. I'd also say, I think, is it Tynan? Said something earlier about climbing rungs, like going one step at a time up a ladder. I had a mentor who helped me really adjust to that because I was struggling with that. It's just not my natural inclination. And so her analogy was, she goes, don't climb rungs. Don't climb up a ladder. She goes, create a spider web. So rungs go like this, spider webs go like this, you know? And so you can go in any direction you need to on a spider web. And so that's been an adjustment, but I really appreciated that visual analogy because I go back to it when I'm feeling like I'm just not getting to the next thing. And I go, you know what? I'm gonna go that way instead. And then go down and then around it, you know? So just being flexible and being able to adapt. I don't know that I've ever had to do it so much. And so I'm doing a lot of that. And then the other part would be learning, what's the analogy about learning how to, or fixing the plane while you're flying it? You know, one of those. I think somebody said another one. It's like trying to brush your teeth while eating Oreo cookies, you know, like it's tricky. It's tricky when this isn't, you know, when you haven't done it for 25 years and you don't know exactly who the right people are to call for things. And, you know, finding your footing in that is tricky, but worthwhile, absolutely. I mean, I'm acquiring skills that I didn't have before that will certainly serve me well in life.
Thank you very much. And I think, am I correct that we are nearing the end of our time? So I just wanted to ask if there's anything that you would like to leave us with at the end of our call. Thank you so much for being a policy driver in our community and also being willing to come and share some of your wisdom with us today. So if there's anything you would like to leave us with, thank you very much again.
You bet. It's been my pleasure. And I really appreciate getting calls like this. This is the fun stuff. And I would just say for the folks on the line, there's always an opportunity to get some time in a council office and kind of see. I know COVID has shifted it in a way that you know, not working at City Hall definitely makes it a little different, but there's always an opportunity to really dig in and help out with some of the council offices. And I'd say that's helpful, even if that's not your, you know, your goal. It's helpful to see how the sausage is made. It's helpful to learn how to write a resolution. So regardless of what role you eventually serve, one of the things that's really helpful for us is when you when you come with it already baked. When people say, oh, I have this idea, I'd love to chat with you and talk it, it's like, there's no time for that. I can't talk you through your idea. I need you to have it mostly baked and just need some cheese on the top before you bring it to me. And so learning how to do that and, and knowing how to put together really solid whereas clauses and be it resolves, and learning how to flip through the charter to see what is and isn't possible and how the city works. It definitely takes some of the sting out of the frustration. So when people are like, I wish they would just, and then you find out, well, they just can't, then it feels less, you feel less powerless. So I'd say dig in, learn as much as you can. If you get an opportunity to work with policymakers, do it, because it will teach you so much about, how to really be as effective as you can in whatever role you eventually take up.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Councilmember, and for all you do. And it's been, like they have said, it's been a pleasure of mine to watch you go from kind of the amazing, I thought, efforts to reach out to lots of different people before you decided to run for council.
Do you remember me pestering you?
Yeah. We met in the library, and then now you are representing, I think, all the people of Austin in an amazing way. So thank you for sharing with us, and I hope we're going to spend the summer supporting a lot of things you work on, and we're going to definitely be supporting Project Connect and safe multimodal transportation, and hopefully we can send these interns into your office with some good ideas. To some extent, a lot of those things are kind of done, and we're going to support them, but maybe on the equitable transit-oriented development arena, we might come with some good whereases and therefores. So
I'll leave you with something. There's something pretty cool going on out in the deep Eastern Crescent, and that, there's lots of conversations around Colony Park and the Expo Center and Walter E. Long, and just thinking about a massive regional park and some of these other amenities and this really giant development. If that might sway some of your thoughts through how to get comprehensive transit out to the Eastern Crescent, definitely don't forget about those things.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank y'all for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Much.
Thank you so much.
I look forward to, I'm certain we'll be in touch. Take care, everybody.
You too.
Thanks.